Well, most of you know Doc, either from out of the museum or from the Corvette Club. But he joined the Air Force in 1967 and graduated from UPT class of 88H at Williams Air Force Base in Arizona in 1968. His first assignment was to be a forward air controller with the 23rd Tactical Air Support Squadron NKP, flying O2 combat missions, call sign NAO-66, the Ho Chi Minh Trail and Laos. Excuse me. Into 190 plus combat missions and accumulated over 760 combat hours in the O2 and OV-10. During his 21-year career with the USAF, he accumulated over 4,300 hours in 14 different military aircraft, with primary assignments in the O2, T-38, F-4, and F-16. After retiring from the USAF in 1987, he joined the General Dynamics Lockheed Company as assistant engineer, F-16 pilot training and subject matter expert. He worked on F-16 air defense fighter, USAF F-16 systems upgrades, EPAF midline updates, Korean Air Force KTX-2 T-50 program, the F-22 training system, and the F-35 training system. And retiring again in 2008, he now volunteers at Fort Worth Aviation Museum and raises Corvettes and does grandpa duties to three of his grandchildren who live nearby Toledo. And he says it's good to hear us at the museum, and these are tales of good stories. With that, here's Doctor.
Thank you, Buster. I'm going to stand for a couple minutes and then sit down. Bob Adams back there is videotaping everything, so it's we're 50% undermanned, so he's too busy. So I'm going to probably just stay in one place. That way you won't have to bounce back and forth. Like Buster said, I've been working on this for quite a while, and even as late as this morning, I had 150 charts that I was going to talk about, and that's just way too many. So I went through and I went delete, 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 delete. So let's talk about the very beginning. You can say, once upon a time, this is it's called tens, or there I was with no altitude, no airspeed, These are mostly my photos, and then thanks to the others that I absconded from Facebook. This is my story, as near as I can remember. And a lot of things have escaped over the years, but in the beginning, talk about how it all started. We'll go through briefly undergraduate pilot training, the O2 training, and Hurlburt, and then some basic survival, jungle survival, the FACT, in-country checkout program at Phan Rang, and then on to NKP, Thailand. This is how it started. Damn B-36 is flying over our farm in South Dakota. Either low altitude or at medium and high altitude, but there was a very distinct sound with those 6 propellers going, and it was just, even if you're on the John Deere tractor, you would stop, look up and listen, and just marvel at it. It was very unusual. And I thought, well, why not? Maybe I can do that. And then, well, maybe not, It depends on the airplane that you're going to go to. I was lucky in that I'm the youngest of 6. And my 3 oldest brothers, the oldest one was in the Air Force, the next one was the Army, the next one was the National Guard. And as a 10-year-old boy sitting around listening to all the stories, you kind of glean and say, ooh, I don't want to do that. And the Air Force looked pretty nice, so I kind of blame it on my brother. He was in the Air Force. He was an enlisted armament instructor on the B-29 and the F-86 on Lowry. So, and I told him before that, you know, I blame him for everything. So then, my first flight in an airplane was when I was a senior in high school. My girlfriend at the time, her parents had some pheasant hunters in from Tennessee. So they took us up for a ride, took off out of the alfalfa field, flew around the neighborhood. And I thought, this ain't bad, I could do that. But then, you know, Landon went off to college, graduated, went to work as an auditor with the government. And then my county draft board said, hey, Lambert, come here. Well, after several negotiations, I was accepted for a pilot training slot in the Air Force. So I went down to OTS, graduated from that. This is a picture of me and my roommate's '67 Corvette. And I don't know if that influenced me later on or what, but that was pretty neat. And the UPT, we had academics, T-37, you can barely see it. And then Spear was our T-38 squadron. Graduating from UPT, my assignment was the O2 on to Lambert, which is down near Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, for the Air Ground Operations School, where you learn how to talk to airplanes. We learned to adjust artillery fire. We taught the airplanes, T-33s acting as bombers. When we talked to them how to put smoke on the target. We take the Jeep out there, use all the radios, and then we also learned how to check out the O2, did low-level activities, treetop navigation. We even took off and landed on grass strips, just to make sure that we were well-versed in the O2. Additionally, we got rides in the A-1E and the T-28, and we had some spare time on the beach. These are 4 of my classmates. I'm in the middle, and 2 of the other folks that were not there also received O2, so there were 6 and 7 in our class that got O2 assignments. So we checked out and flew the O2 at Holly. Exposure rides at A1E. The biggest thing I remember from that is the cockpit is huge. You've got that huge propeller in the front, and the regular pilots had one leg that was much more developed than the other because of putting in the rudder on takeoff. My night flight in the T-28, we dropped napalm. Again, another exposure to what may be going on in the land in the midnight activity. Anyway, went on more education. Basic survival school at Fairchild, including the enemies and combination options, several of their interview techniques, and then at the end, they named off several of us if we wanted to volunteer for additional training. And we all kind of looked and said, oh, you should never volunteer for anything. But hey, we're inside a building, so it can't be that bad. So we raised our hand, we volunteered, we all looked at each other, and we were all aircrew members. So that kind of gave you an idea of what might be coming up. Anyway, you all heard of the TAP code that the POWs used. This training was kind of sort of related. The school was in the school's catalog, but the definition was somewhat vague. Anyway, it was another way of communicating with the outside world if you got captured. And my contact was a gentleman in New York City. And I thought at the time, here's a country boy from South Dakota, and he's conversing with somebody from New York City. Strange. After that, went to Southeast Asia. Well, wait a minute. Went to jungle survival at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. That's me in the back in the light flight suit. We were split into groups. We had basic classroom instruction, and then we went out to the jungle. Our little Philippine Negrito was our officer in charge. When we got out there, we were issued some rice, a parachute panel, and then we were told to go hide for, as if you just landed in the jungle and you wanted to E&E and hide from the bad guys. Well, it didn't take them long. I found a stream, and I found the bank had been overgrown, dropped in. I was able to crawl in behind it, and I thought, they're never going to find me. So I stayed there for a long time, and then it's one of these, I see you. So, all in all, it was good training. Then off to Southeast Asia. From the PI, went to Benoit. We landed, went up to Phan Rang, and did the in-country checkout in the O2, where they told us how to fly in the local area, how to distinguish good guys and bad guys, particularly when they're hiding behind trees and etc. And it was just an exposure to what you probably encounter during your follow-on assignment. My other classmates were assigned in-country, and I was assigned to the squadron up in Naconf now. So I felt very fortunate when I got there, because in Naconf Nam it was somewhat primitive, although you're only exposed to the war 5 hours or whatever your flight time was. You come back to base and it's relatively safe, as opposed to the guys that were in country and they were exposed to it 24 hours a day. Here's an aerial view of South Vietnam, Laos, North Vietnam, Thailand. The red line is the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and extended from North Vietnam past the DMZ, and then broke off a lot of sub-roads into South Vietnam. Nha Cao Phan Nam is right here, and that's where I spent the primary number of months, but I was associated with the OL1 operating location down in Yuma, and we split the area up. One thing that a lot of people don't understand is that when you think of South Vietnam, at least I did, you think of lowlands, jungle, rice paddies. You don't realize that there's a lot of mountains. And even in Yuma, we were just out skipping a jump west of Big Mountain Range, and then just east of NKP, the Big Mountain Range in the DMZ. So, some of the mountains were 6,500 feet. So it really made a difference on your bombing techniques. Here's a listing of the bases that we had in Thailand, Nha Cao Phan Nam, Yuma, and then the F-4s and F-105s. We had tankers and B-52s down at Udapau. Once I arrived at NKP, it was somewhat unusual in that it was kind of like a ball propeller base. We had a Laotian O1 at the south end, and then O2s, a couple of 123s, a couple of CH-53s, the Jolly Green Giants. We had 3 or 4 squadrons of A1s, and then at the north end we had the squadron of A-26s. So when jet airplanes came to do low approaches, instrument approaches, everybody just kind of stopped in their track and said, "Ooh, jet engine." It's nice to know. One thing I want to, if you check the rainfall in July and August for NKP, I don't know if you can see it or not. Anyway, 18 and 20 some inches a month. So there's typical dry season, and then there's really, no kidding, the wet season. And this is just one of the pictures I had of how the rain was coming down. We would generally take off if there's any chance of breaks in the clouds, but if it was such that it was just completely IFR and not able to rendezvous with the fighters, then we'd just come back on board. Here's a picture of Nankoff Mountain looking north. When I got there, we had 6,000 feet of PSP runway, and I think we had a half a mile of paved road into the base. By the time I left, I think all the roads in the base were paved, and we had a new asphalt runway, which I think was 8,000 feet. But I'm not sure that I had the luxury of taking off and landing on that one. We even had an instrument approach to NKP, so we weren't completely out in the boonies, although the other bases in Thailand, have a brain cramp. They were more like bases that you'd see in the U.S. They had lots of the standard amenities, and they would even have intramural basketball, football, and softball. At Nankoff Phnom, our call sign was NAIL. And when you got there, NAIL 01 through 10 was reserved for the squadron commander, ops officer, flight commanders. And then you got to select whatever number you wanted from those that were available, because previous years, people still had them, and I'm not sure why I selected 66, but maybe it was a vision that I would come back and drive on Route 66 in a Corvette. One of the items that you had to take was your E&E photo, and in addition to that, you also had a couple of key statements that they would use to validate you if you got shot down. For instance, I think mine were, what was the color of my first car? And then what was your school mascot? And I was lucky, both my high school and my college mascot was a tiger. So I thought that was pretty neat. The O2, we had a squadron of O2s. Again, we parked on the PSP. We both had gray ones and black ones. Black ones were the night birds. Spent a little bit of time on this. When you go fly, you had your survival vest, and you had lots of goodies on there. And I had a gun belt, and my .38 on my right hip, my survival knife on the left hip, and in my hand here you can see that I had binoculars, and then I had the intel book from intelligence, and that contained all your frags that you're going to go fly and put in the fighters. It also contained what they call the intelligence wheel, where you could set up, putting alpha over kilo and then reading out another. You could send encrypted messages over the radio if you needed. It also had base altitudes, rather than rendezvous with fighters and saying, hey, come in, I'm going to be at 10,000. I want you to come down to 12 and we'll rendezvous. Every day they had a base altitude, so when the fighters checked in, you would say, I'm going to be at base, let's just say base was at 8,000. I want you to come in, fighters, I want you to come in at base +4. You know, so that would deconflict until you got visual, and then you could do whatever you needed to do. Typical mission was anywhere, depending on the area, anywhere from 3 to 3.5, 4 hours. I had several missions that were 4.8 hours, and 3 that I had over 5, 5.2 and 5.1. Whenever I flew, I would, in my lower pant pocket, I would take 2 water bottles the night before, put them in the freezer, and I would have 2 water bottles along with 2 extra survival radio batteries in my flight suit pocket. And then in my helmet bag, I would have another water bottle, and then a water bottle generally with either 7-Up or orange drink. Generally flew with a parachute on the back. The laptop parachute was available. I think we flew with it once or twice, and it was just too ungainly. It interfered with what we were doing in the cockpit. And the other thing, we had a flight vest, and because of the temperature was such, generally didn't fly with it on, but frequently we just put it on the seat and sat on it, and that offered a little bit of comfort, and also in case, you know, a Gomer was trying to shoot at you straight below, it protected you. Here's my office for a year that I was over there. 2 engines, both prop jobs, one in the front, one in the back. We had 3 radios, UHF, VHF, Fox mic, and then we had Fox mic secure. So actually there's 4 radios that we could talk on. And so flying and using binoculars, you're somewhat busy. Once you got to the area, we also never flew straight and level for more than 4 seconds. We're always jinking, you know, changing altitude or heading, and that would spoil the tracking solution for the bad guys at the ground. We pilots kind of got used to that, but every once in a while we had somebody that would ride along, and there's a couple of stories that I'll tell later on that was not pretty. So, as we learned in UPT, you have to follow the checklist. Buttons and dials and switches and little colored lights. And then you gotta have some humor. If you can't read it, it says, it's actually a dummy, but the VC thinks twice before he takes a shot at me. There were some rumors that there was a bounty on facts, and there's some truth in that, because the Gomers thought, if we shoot the fact down, then the fighters won't come. And then there was a thought that, well, if you shoot just the fighters and let the fact alone, the fact's going to bring more fighters. So, we're damn if you do and damn if you don't. But you saw it both ways. In addition to all the stuff I had in my survival vest, we had an E&E map. It was rubberized, and it covered the entire area that we were flying over. And it was rubberized because if you took it out and laid it on the ground, or even the humidity would rip it. This is, never had to really use it, but it was there and we really liked it. And we'd go back to the base and land, taxi in. If we had unspent missiles, they just safed him up and turned the airplane. Well, Triple W, some of you may recognize him. He is Walter W. Wan. He was an O2 pilot, a couple of months ahead of me. Really experienced, really gung-ho. He got some of his lieutenants together and he said, "Lieutenant, we have plenty of missiles. There's no need to bring missiles back. So at the end of your area time, if you know where a suspected truck park is, have at it. Or there may be a possibility that you may be right up to the border between Laos and North Vietnam. About 15 degrees nose up. Missiles will go forever, I've been told." The bad guys also not only had roads, but they also had cables stretched across some rivers, and they would float some of their supplies down. Well, being a young, intrepid guy with damn little experience, I was out there, and I found one. And I thought, good. So I rolled in, and the typical roll-in for marking your airplane, marking a rocket, is you pull the nose up, bring the throttle, make sure to prop back, to dissipate some airspeed, kick in the rudder to get turned, and then you roll in, get the pepper, fire, get the nose up to stop your rate of descent, and then add power, and away you go. So I did that. You roll in, fired the missile, pulled up, added power, and the prop essentially went to feather, the front one. And I thought, oh. So I look over here, there's a mountain. I look over here, there's a mountain. And I look over there, there's just a little tiny V. And I thought, I'm going to make that. Jettison my 2 rocket pods. And I made it home. They didn't really fuss about the fact that I had to jettison pods. But it was a known problem with the front prop. If you had it too quickly, hydraulic pressure in there couldn't keep up or whatever. So again, I was out there running my own business, doing a little VR. You know, got the binoculars going, and then look out front, and I see what I think is, now I can equate it to chaff out of an F-16 or F-4. But there were just millions of little things floating in the air, and I thought, they haven't told us about any aircraft, any anti-aircraft shooting that stuff at us. And I thought, Lord Almighty, I don't know what's going to happen. Lord, it's up to you. Well, the closer I got, then I got into it, it was leaflets. Some damn U-10 pilot had gone out to the area, dropped his stuff, didn't tell anybody that he was going to be there. I was not happy. One time I was doing a straight-in back at U-Bahn, and U-Bahn had 123s, 130s, a whole bunch of F4s. But I was on this straight-in, and tower cleared a 123 to do an overhead pattern. So I kind of watched him. I watched him come around, and land. And about then, I was over the overrun. And then within 1 nanosecond, we were 90 degrees to the damn runway. And the tower said, Neil, you have a difficulty? And in a couple seconds, I said, yes, the next time you increase that spacing, because that is wake turbulence, and it doesn't like flight airplanes. Another instance out there, this was generally south of Chapon, near the South Vietnam border. An OV-1 Mohawk, some of you are probably familiar with that, asked AB-CCC if they could have some assistance because they had just lost an F4 crash and they wanted to take another look. So I said, yeah, I can do that. So I rendezvoused with them. I was high cover, he went down and looked real close. He came back up high, I went down and looked real close, a couple times even with the binoculars. There's just no way that anybody could have survived that crash. And something just, kind of told me, you need to remember this. So, several months later, I went over to Intel and said, hey, on such and such a date, such and such a time, there's an F4 that crashed. So they looked it up, and they said, yeah, sure enough. And it was Tommy Cleese. A South Dakota boy. Tommy Cleese had gone to Howard High School, the county seat of Minor County. I had gone to Fedora High School in Minor County, 15 miles away. He was the same class as I was, and we played basketball against each other. So, two South Dakota boys in the same sky, half world away, and one made it, one didn't. I did that. Okay, my area of responsibility, the Panhandle. The red line is the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Again, this is Acom Phenom, and this is Yubon. Nape Pass was easy to find because there was a bombed out French chateau there. Magia, Pancrai, the DMZ, and then and Chapone, and other points that went in. And we covered all the way from Nape all the way down to the Cambodian border. Here we go. I was in the area of Magia Pass, as I recall, and my replacement was supposed to be coming out, and the squadron called me up and said, hey, your replacement has a hard broke airplane, will not be able to come out. The airplane to the south area has lots of frag targets, and there is one frag target that has to be put in your area, and you have to stay there and put it in. We realize that you're not going to have enough cash to get home, so we want you to divert into Dong Ha, South Vietnam. And I thought, Dong Ha, South Vietnam? Well, here I am in Laos over here. This is the DMZ, and Dong Ha sits over here. You got Khe Sanh, you got a couple others. But Dong Ha is a Marine base, PSP, maybe 2,500 feet of runway. So on the way over, you can look off in the distance and you can see Khe Sanh. This is an early picture of Khe Sanh because in the summer of '68, that's when it got destroyed. So I passed Khe Sanh, past Camp Carroll, and go to Dong Ha. So I come up on tower frequency, tell them, hey, nail 66, umpteen miles west, straight in, gear down, and tower says, Roger, you're the only one in the pattern, clear to land. Winds are altimeter and winds. So I come in on land, and I'm taxiing down this PSP, and I look over, there's nothing on the right-hand side of the runway. I look over on the left-hand side, and there's nothing over there, except a bunker that stands 5 feet tall, and there's a little slit at the top. So I say, Raj, would you send the fuel trucks out, because I need to get gas to go? And they said, Neil, we don't have fuel trucks. I said, what? I said, the only fuel we have is a bladder at the southeast corner of the runway. And I say, Roger. So I taxi over there, and there it is, the bladder, about almost the size of this, rubberized bladder, stands by 8 tall. There's a 55-gallon barrel drum with a hand pump and a step ladder. Welcome to Dong In all the squadrons I've been in the Air Force, you know, pilots go out in pre-flight airplanes, and in the O2, you actually got on the ladder, you got up and you checked that the gas caps, all four, were severely locked, and then you checked the oil and all of it. Well, and they frowned upon maintenance and pilots getting together and talking about things. So here I am, in South Vietnam, Dong Ha, and I think, well, shit. I think, hey, it's no different than being on the farm in South Dakota with my John Deere tractor, you know, and the gas burner. So I get out into the step ladder, I start pumping gas, you know, and then I think, whoa, that runway is only 2,600 feet long. You know, taking off at 6,000 feet, I think we did takeoff and landing data on day one, and then after that you said, eh. So I thought, whoa, 2,600 feet, I better stop now. So I got back in the airplane. Luckily, both engines started. So I called for taxi, and they told me to taxi out. So I take off, I fly back home, I land, I walk in to the ops officer, who was the squadron ops, and he said, well, how did your vert go to Dong Ha? And I bit my tongue, and with all due respect, I said, just to piss him off, I said, yeah, piece of cake. Turn around and walk off. But that was my experience in Dong Ha, Vietnam. A couple other interesting snippets. On infill, exfil, we would have a CH-43 to go in and pick up road teams that we inserted. And some of them were Green Beret type road teams, some were indigenous. But there's one time I had the Green Beret guy along with me, and we were getting ready to mark the target, the landing area for the helo, and he went in, and the other thing about Nakhon Phanom, when we got there, there were certain ROEs that you had to adhere to. One was, you really couldn't tell people what you did at Nakhon Phanom. You could tell them that you were the guest of the Thai government in their suppression of enemy activity in the extreme western portion of the DMZ. And there were no cameras allowed on the flat line, no rule. And then the squadron rules were, once you got over the trail, your minimum altitude had to be at least 1,500 feet to keep you out of small arms fire. And you could not hit a target that was beyond 200 yards of a navigable road. So you were always going down the road, and then once you found an offshoot, you were exploring that area because they were building new roads into South Vietnam. Here's a typical choke point that you would see. Again, Laos and generally Vietnam were very lush and green, but you can see where after numerous bomb strikes, I mean, it was very hot. You turned jungle into gravel pits. Another example, and the string of bomb craters out here in a straight line, or generally a straight line, are the strikes from B-52. This is an example of what we had to put up with the haze that exhibited over Laos. Sometimes it was because of all the smoke and bomb dust, and other times it was because they were burning the rice fields, and of course all the smoke came up, and it was just really hard to see. And you can tell this is a really popular choke point. You can see one of the wrecking birds right here in the middle. I think that was a Navy A4 or A5. And another B-52 strike. We never got this low, but these were part of what the bad guys were using for their trail, the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And like I said, they were also developing new trails. When you rendezvous with a set of fighters, in your 3-hour range time, you got briefed at intel as to what targets were fragged. That means they were higher headquarters issued. Certain targets at certain TOTs. So you'd go out there and you'd fly along and you generally try to observe that target well before the time that you're going to actually rendezvous, just to see what's going on. And then you'd rendezvous with the fighters either by attack and radial DME or sometimes good ground references like a choke point. But when the fighter checked in, he would give you his lineup. He'd say, this is Buick Flight, 2 F4s, whatever ordnance he had, whatever playtime he had. And then you'd come back and say, Roger, this is the target, what it is, the elevation, altimeter setting, what the winds are, what the best bailout heading is, and playtime. And then depending on what the target was, a lot of them like to drop, if they have playtime, to drop singles and see what we could develop in the target area. Sometimes they were just, they're short on gas, so there's one pass, salvo, everybody would go. And then at the end of that, then you'd go in and you would say, okay, fighters go high and dry, I'll go in for BDA, bomb damage assessment. So you'd go in and try to stay above the 1,500 foot restriction. But you go in and see what kind of damage you could observe on the target. And depending on what the target was, if it was a truck park, submerged road, whatever. And you would give them a score, and it was the percentage of their ordnance on the target area, and then their percentage of the target that was destroyed. And unfortunately, with all the smoke and haze, sometimes that's all they got. You'd say, I give you 100 over nothing, BDA, smoke and haze. They would understand that. Every once in a while, you would say, Buick Flight, your BDA is 75% over 100%. Meaning, they got 75% of the weapons in the target area. They destroyed the target. And then on a couple of them, I added your number 4 dive angle was much too shallow. And they would come back and say, thank you, Dad, we'll take care of that. So number 2 and number 4 of a 4-ship were always the inexperienced guys. Lead was always the most experienced, and then number 3. Got some comparisons here. They had lots of small arms, and then they had the 23 millimeter, 37, 57, and 85. I show you here the relative size. Here's a baseball. Here's a 20 millimeter. That's like we use in the F4 and the F16. 23 millimeter is one of theirs, one of the popular ones. Then the 30 millimeter size is what the A10 shoots. And you see the next one is the 37 millimeter. Again, a very popular one that the bad guys like to use. And then we had the 40 millimeter. Just realized that the 57 and 85 are a whole lot bigger than that. So the first time that I knew that they were shooting back at me quite often we flew with the right window open so we could hear ground fire. And I'm out here jinking, behaving myself, doing my little VR, and then all of a sudden, I see out of the corner of my eye this red ball go streaking by, and I can smell it, the phosphorus smell, and then I hear the boom, 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 you know, and I thought, well shit, they're trying to kill me, just like I'm trying to kill them. Anyway, that's what some of those guys were using. Hard to see when they're camouflaged like that. More of their guns, the big stuff. Sometimes when the weather's bad or certain missions dictated, they did what they call sky spot, where they just flew off a radial DME. Sometimes they had a lead, but they would just fly straight level and then drop their bombs on an area target. Sometimes they were big sky spots. You see all the bombs here, and the lead, I think, is a wrecking bird. Here's a backup of an F4. Typical weather, you know, it would come and go. Sometimes it would obscure the trail, and you'd have to go to an alternate target. Sometimes you'd have the benefit of B-52. I had an experience one time when the squadron said, hey, you know, go look at this area at 10:30, and we're going to have a B-52 bomb strike go through there at 11. So you go in and see what you can see, and then afterwards, you know, go in and assess any BDA. So I was there at 10:30, and I was looking around. I had my glasses, and then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this black shadow go by. And I'm wondering, what the hell? And then there's another one, and another one. Well, they were either early, or I was told the wrong time. But I got out of there real quick, and luckily the bombs were going that way, and I was able to swing to the left and get out. But not a pleasant experience. Here's what you might call a target-rich environment. Here's part of the trail, part of what the trucks look like on the trail. And I'm not sure, but I think this is probably in North Vietnam, just after October '68, we stopped going north. They realized that they were sneaky. They would drive all these trucks right up to the damn border of Laos and North Vietnam, and they knew that we couldn't hit them. We had to wait for them to get on the trail in Laos before we could attack them. Strange ROV. Here's another significant bombing point. This is called Bandaloy, Snoopy, because you see the outline of the Snoopy here with the river. And it was very easy for the fighters to recognize where Bandaloy was, and if your target was anywhere near that, then you could always rendezvous and then take them either up or down the trail. Marianne, how am I doing on time? Time. I better hurry. Okay. Here's some unique stuff that I'll just go through quickly. When I got there, we were authorized to carry the M16 as a fact. Couldn't go below 1,500 feet, but still. And I took my M16 several times. I'd load up my helmet bag with 5 or 6 clips, take it out, and then fly along. If you didn't find anything, you just harass things on the ground. But there are 2 ways to fire the M16. You're sitting here in the cockpit, window open, you could stick it out and go, and all the shell casings would come inside. Well, it didn't take very long to say, well, that's not very smart. All the FOD potential getting to the rotors and whatnot. So we stuck the M16 out the window. Well, where do you think the shell casings went? In the rear prop. And we started losing too many props, so the squadron commander said, enough of that. Plenty of missiles. When you go out, we lieutenants were very naive in some respects. We'd go out, we'd put our fighters in, VR, our replacement would come and sat down and picked up those guys. And one of the gunships was half a click away, and he said, I've got guys that need to be picked up now. And the CH-53 said, I can't do it right now. And so the gunship went in, went down and hovered, and when he came back up, there was a rope and 3 guys on it. And they hovered up and went over, and since we were really close to Vietnam, they went over and landed. Was that you, Roger? Weather divert. Again, when the weather was really bad, I was flying out of Yuma, and weather was really, really crappy. Although every once in a while I was able to find a portion of the trail, identify exactly where it was. And then Hillsborough, the controlling agency, said, hey Neil, I got a weather divert from South Vietnam, can you handle it? And I said, yes I can. I got 3 trucks, and there was an opening in the clouds. I think God thought that I needed a little help. So the clouds were opening up, radial DV, the Navy fighters checked in, and it was whatever the call sign was, blew 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 16 airplanes. And they were bingo fuel because they came off of a weather divert. And I said, I got 3 trucks down there, you're all cleared, in turn, and they came in one at a time, came down the chute, dropped all their bombs, and we got all 3. And the last interesting snippet, I had 2 last missions. Again, flying out there in the Magia, Vanderboy type of area. I was working my area, and the FAC who was working in the adjoining area had one of his fighters get shot down. So, and he was at the end of his area time. So one of the other O2s that was going to go in my area went to his area, and they were coordinating the location of the fighter on the ground. And because they had their head up and they ran into each other, mid-air, OV-10, O2. The OV-10 prop sliced the cables in the left pylon of the O2, but he was still able to maintain control. The OV-10 had to bail out. So now you've got 2 guys on the ground, the O2 struggling back to a base, and I'm RTB, return to base. So as I land, the squadron commander comes out with 2 hamburgers, a Coke, and said, you're the only guy in the only airplane that we have available. You'll get new rockets, all the cash you can, but go out there and fly one more time. So I did. I put the fighters in, and it was a 4.8-hour mission. And the thing I remember most was that on the way back to NKP, I must have been at 10, 11,000 feet, because I didn't want to get anybody to get that golden BB on me. We did have a couple of squadron members that got hit. Here's an O2 with the right wingtip. The O2 with the left wingtip. The O2s that we flew out of NKP and U-Bahn generally did not have any USAF markings. And we as pilots generally did not have USAF markings, although we did carry a little extra green money in case we had to divert. And here's Milliken, who got hit in the tail with a 37 millimeter. And here's an O2 that didn't make it. 2 casualties, nighttime final turn at NKP. Remember the O2 that got the mid-air, lived back to an Air America base, was coming in. He had a low ocean observer with him. They were coming into land, and an Air America C-47 came out, took the runway, and Jim Searcy was the pilot. He had to go around because the C-47 was on the runway. So he staggered around, came back around. Again, you know, the controls were in the left elevator. So it was a combination of whatever else he could get, plus differential power. But they crashed in the overrun. But this is the airplane, and both of them made it out just with the strap runs on their neck. Here's an O2, not an NKP, but you can see what happens to when you get. December 68, NKP, and other places. Bob Hope came, and it was a welcome sight for everybody, obviously. Ann Margaret was the main attraction. Roosevelt Gerger was there. But one thing about that we didn't understand until we got clued in. At all these year shows, the people in the front are the airmen, the enlisted airmen, and all the officers are in the back. We have, at the end of your tour, you generally you get watered down, and you get a bottle of champagne or whatever. Out at the flight line, you get in the truck, and you go to either the officers club or the hooch, depending on what's going on. And here's a picture of 5 nails, and a picture of a couple more. And this is me in the background. Every month you would have a going away party. Colonel Alexander was the squadron commander during my first portion. Just a wonderful guy. He gave me my checkout, and I was flying combat missions solo over Laos as a second lieutenant. My party suit, my going away. The 23rd task had an internal award, and I don't know if you may not be able to read that. I just happen to have it right here, and I think it's a little humorous, but it was well worth the activity that we did. Be it known that First Lieutenant Darrell R. Lambert distinguished himself as a forward air controller from 14 November 68 to 21 October 69, while stationed at Naked Fanny Royal Air Force Base. That was NACOM phenomenon. While engaged in aerial operations against a hostile force, he performed in an unpredictable and never to be duplicated manner, directing the devastation of numerous village picnic grounds, tree parks, and suspected BC vegetable gardens in the extreme western DMZ. Though faced with threats of cricket, Hillsborough, fast-moving facts, and red smoking balls ascending from the ground, Lieutenant Lambert and his unarmed aircraft could always be counted on to confusedly and erratically direct fighter aircraft against the logistical complexes of the hostile foe. Despite severe air sickness and excruciating pain caused by a combination of unsynchronized props, uncoordinated flying, and not being able to use a relief tube, he frequently flew when scheduled, generally took off on time, and occasionally flew the entire period. His exploits and achievements, both real and imagined, reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force, demonstrating that he truly possesses balls of brass. That reminds me, when I first got to NKP, they issued you your name tag, and they said, Daryl Lambert. That's not going to fit. I said, well, okay, put down my initials, DR Lambert. I walked into the squadron and somebody said, Doc, come here. And I went, oh, me. You know, I've been called lots of things. Doc ain't bad. I think I'll answer to that. So, since 1968 at NKP, I've been called Doc with all my Air Force and GD. But whenever I go back to South Dakota, it's still Daryl. We're almost done here. And just to prove that, that's my license plate for my truck. This is Karen Brinkley's airplane. However, I flew it in July of 1968 out of NKP. She even gave me a ride a couple of years ago with it. And this is her, and her armament is most appropriate. You know, normal, you'd have 8 Willie Pete's and whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, in this one, it's just an unlimited number of harsh words. Sometimes rude hand gestures, too. So, congratulations, Karen.
And Triple W flew it too.
This, a tribute to all those 58,479, one of which was Leroy Cornwell, pilot training classmate of myself and Tom Clark, who was F-100 jock. And that's the end of my PowerPoint presentation. We've gone over time, but I'll be more than glad to answer any questions if I can.
I'm Karen, for those of you that didn't know.
Doc, did you always fly solo?
I'm sorry?
Did you always fly solo?
Oh, no, and you know, let me explain. When I was going through these slides the last few days, I went through all my pictures and I'll talk about that and that. I selected, I don't know, 190 pictures I was going to show. No, come on. So I went through and I went delete. I generally flew alone with the exception of, you had a green beret when you do infill, exfill. You had a Laotian observer if you're going to do anything with the Laotian Army. You had an Air Force photographer who would go along and take pictures of certain targets pre and post flight, and then of certain targets that headquarters is going to frag for the next day or so. And then you had people that would come along and just get a ride along. I took one of the F-105 squadron commanders along for a ride. There was once where I took I think it was a 130 Navigator Major. He made the mistake of going to the officers' club and having a big spaghetti lunch. You know, and we got out into the area, you know, and I started drinking. And when people start to express a little uncomfort, you know, just give them the airplane. Say, you got the airplane, let them fly. And it'll take their mind off of, you know, the chicken rudder. Yeah, that's pretty neat. I said, okay, you take the airplane. I don't want to take the airplane. You know? And he said, oh God, I got to throw up. And I said, well, you know, know, use your we had piddle packs and we had barf bags. And he said, I don't have a piddle bag, I don't have a barf bag. I said, you're not gonna throw up in my airplane. So use your helmet bag. So he did. I mean, it was gross. And then he looked over and said, now what? I said, throw it out the window. I did have one photographer out of Yuma that flew frequently with me. And in addition to all those things that I flew with, you know, the binoculars, the Intel bag, all those other things, I also took my 8mm camera along. It was my camera. I didn't ask anybody, I just did it. So I have a lot of 3-minute 8mm portions of things that went on out in the area, bombers committed bomb, you know. Unfortunately, I don't have time to show it. That'll be next time. But it's about a 10-minute, and he combined me leaving the squadron building, walking out to the airplane, doing a pre-flight, going out to the arming area, taking off, going out to the area, putting in sets of fighters, watching the bombs, the smoke explode, coming back, and we were coming back on a visual straight in, and there was a pair of F4s coming in, also on a straight in. So, and he was sitting in the right-hand seat, and normally on the return, he would doze off. So, we were flying at probably 1,000 feet line of rest. So, I went like this, and they went like that, and I went like that, they went like that, and then I went like that, and they said, oh, okay. They didn't follow me. And that's on the film, it's really nice to have that, something that you did 50 years ago, and sometimes it's like yesterday. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.